Good day. Welcome to Eric Hates Games. This is a talk show about games, the people who make them, the people who play them, and everything in between. Each week we pick a topic and discuss. There will be tangents, there will be disagreements, but most of all, there will be games. If you have an idea for an episode, or you have questions you'd like answered by our esteemed gaming experts, send an email to @gmail.com. This week, we're discussing how a subculture of misplay took the gaming world by storm. My name is Eric, and I love speedrunning. So, speedrunning 101, what is it?
So,
the best at explaining it.
So, speedrunning is basically the practice, not necessarily practice, but it's the idea of trying to beat a game as fast as physically possible, and there are variations of that. So there's any percentage speedruns in which players try to get as far as they can in the game, or rather get to the end of the game. Doesn't matter what they do, they just got to get to the end as fast as possible. There's 100% speedruns where you got to get everything in a game and then get to the end as fast as possible. And there's variations depending on the actual game itself. Mm-hmm. There's tool-assisted speedruns, which they're basically software where you can program it to make very precise button presses and that sort of thing to see what the perfect speedrun would look like. But usually it's something that'd be stupid hard to actually reproduce as a human. So a computer does it.
Yeah, and so when we say beat it as, like, complete the game as quickly as possible, we mean ignoring all of the other typical objectives that go into a game.
Yeah, so breaking a game is very popular. Well, not very popular. It's usually something that's done. Glitches are very much like a mainstay in all the very popular games that are speedrun. Mm-hmm. Like if you watch Mario 64 get speedrun, then the whole thing is just glitches.
I see. And glitches, of course, are things that weren't supposed to happen in the game but did, like going through a wall, right? This wall is supposed to stop you, but if you have enough momentum, you can appear on the other side of the wall. So, Charles, can you take us through some very popular speedrunning events that happen throughout the year?
There's a lot, but the one that's definitely most popular is Games Done Quick. Mm-hmm. There are two main kinds of Games Done Quick. Awesome Games Done Quick, which is done in usually the first or second week of January, and Summer Games Done Quick, which is done usually either towards the end of June or beginning of July. Mm-hmm. They each go for 1 week straight, no breaks, and it just speedrun after speedrun after speedrun. They fly out the pretty much the best speedrunners in the entire world, and pretty much have them go at different kinds of speedrunning, whether it be tool-assisted, any percent, 100%, or even really stupid stuff like Punch-Out, blindfolded.
Yeah. And so AGDQ, Summer Games Done Quick, SGDQ, these are events that started around 2010. And just to give people some context of what they do, like you said, they raise money for charity by bringing out these competitive speedrunners. And AGDQ last year, I think, raised over $2.39 million for Doctors Without Borders. And SGDQ raised over $3 million for the Prevent Cancer Foundation. So these people overall are practicing this sport, so to speak, in the name of a good cause, right? And I don't know if you mentioned the schedules, right? Mm-hmm. There's very strict scheduling of this. So can you tell us a little more about that?
Usually they release the schedules probably like a month or two in advance, so pretty far. And so like any fan can just look at it in advance and see, oh look, on Sunday at 3:15 p.m. they're playing Zelda Ocarina of Time, any percent. I'll watch that and it'll say like, okay, this is going specifically for 50 minutes, 25 minutes, very specific times. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and so they're able to schedule it because these people, we talk about why do people speedrun, and I'll get your opinion on that in a second, Gavin, but they know the strict schedule because they know that Ocarina of Time is going to take 39 minutes to beat. And they know that because these speedrunners are spending hundreds of hours of their time all year round trying to perfect their speedrun.
Yeah, pretty much.
Right? And so how much time does it take to get good at something like this?
A while.
Yeah, a long time.
And it's devoting. It's like running the 100-meter, dash over and over and over and shaving off a tenth of a second here and a tenth of a second there. Except you're playing video games.
Yeah.
And you're playing them in a way that wasn't meant to be played. So do either of you know anything about the speedrunning community? Do they help each other?
Yeah, I mean, in the speedrunning community, it's literally a community. So let's say someone finds a glitch that skips a 5-second portion of a game.
Mm-hmm.
Most of the time, people would probably want to keep that to themselves so they can have a faster time.
Yeah.
But since it's a community, everybody kind of shares what they find, how they can execute certain games faster, stuff like that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and what are some popular games to speedrun, Adam?
Well, probably the most prevalent, Mario 64. Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time is really popular, Super Metroid, stuff like that.
Yeah, and we're talking Super Mario 64 came out in 1996, is that correct?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. It was a launch game for the Nintendo 64. Takes a long time to beat that game, and the world record currently is 6 minutes and 36 seconds.
Yeah.
It's an absurd number if you've ever played that video game.
Oh, yeah.
I mean,
like 6 minutes, I'm still only getting the first star. So.
yeah, that's about the time that it would take a normal player to get 1 star, or
The first star.
the first
The
star in
tutorial
Super Mario
star.
64.
Yes.
Yeah. Go ahead, Charles.
I was going to say, one of my favorite things is Ocarina of Time, speedrunning that game, because that's a game that they've made a lot of improvements over the year. Now what they do today is the first dungeon in Zelda Ocarina of Time, there is a very specific glitch you could do like into the wall, and it breaks the game and sends you to the final boss of the game. And this is a game that takes 25 hours about.
Wow. And what's the world record for Ocarina of Time?
That is, I believe, 16 minutes and 38 seconds.
16 minutes and 58 seconds.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. And I think we should mention a couple of other world record times just for more context. Super Mario World, a Super Nintendo game, was beaten in 41 seconds. This, again, is an expansive game. If you're playing through it as a normal game player, you can spend a dozen hours on that game pretty easily. Getting the Star Road, getting all the extra stages and stuff like that. Resident Evil on the PlayStation 1, as Jill, which is important,
Yes.
slightly different game, is 44 minutes and 21 seconds. And some longer games, now we're going into like endurance sports, your marathon runs. Final Fantasy VII, any percentage, 6 hours, 59 minutes, and 56 seconds. This is a game that spans 3 discs, 4 discs?
Yeah,
of
it's
3
content?
discs.
It normally
Although-
should take you about 35 hours to beat.
That's a 35-hour game beaten in under 7 hours, just under 7 hours.
Though
And-
the next one is probably my favorite,
Yes.
Persona 5. That is a game that, I've talked to many people. Most people take about 100 to 120 hours to beat that game.
Very
Yes.
long game.
This is a game that
Extremely
came
long.
out 2 years ago.
Uh-huh.
The speedrun record is just over 16 hours.
16 hours for a 100-hour game.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
we're talking about cutting 90% of what? How do you cut 90% of content out of a game?
Skip cutscenes.
So yeah, how does speedrunning happen, right? Like that's a real question that, especially if you've never watched a speedrun, you have to try to answer.
Which are very entertaining to watch.
Yeah,
Now they are.
they're great to watch if you like a specific game, right? If you love Donkey Kong Country, watching someone play it in a completely different fashion is fascinating.
Yeah, when I first got into like watching speedruns, this was probably like 2014, sometime around then.
Mm-hmm.
I'd be studying and I'd leave on my computer and I'd go on Twitch and I'd see, oh hey, some dude's playing Skyward Sword, which I happen to like is a Zelda game.
Mm-hmm.
I know it's controversial,
Uh-huh.
but there's this one dude I found named Test Runner,
Uh-huh.
and watching him play through Skyward Sword was fascinating because there's this one glitch in the game where basically the start menu of the game is the hub world, the main island that the game sort of uses.
Yeah, yeah.
And in the start screen, you can run around that island.
So you can make progress before even starting the game.
Yes.
Incredible.
And that's used to skip a lot.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
So a very common speedrunning technique is breaking through collision walls. And this is Super Mario 64 probably made this most famous, where the way games work is if I'm a programmer, I have this 3D object here, right? And it has a collision. I hit it here, that means I stop, right? I'm the character, I have to stop here. I'm going to hit it as lightly as possible, Charles. But in Super Mario 64, if you turn around and crouch and do the backwards jump into nothing, it builds up momentum. And so if I'm going 10 frames per second fast, let's say, and this is like a 20 frame or a 20 unit wide wall, now if I can get fast enough so that I move 30 frames, one frame I'm here, next frame I'm 30 frames over here, and all of a sudden I'm what's called out of bounds. And now that you're out of bounds, you can go many places where the developers never thought you should ever go.
I think the Japanese, many people like to play the Japanese versions of games because Japanese, you could tell more words in fewer text in the Japanese language. So people prefer to do that because guess what? It would save, even if only like 3 seconds per conversation, that builds up a lot. And for a game like Persona 5, which is over half text, it's understandable how someone could cut down that much time.
That is incredible. So now not only are we breaking in-game like programmer type stuff, but we're coming down to language. And like, what language is the most efficient language? Let's play the game in that language. Because as you mentioned, Japanese is a lot more condensed, and so less time wasted in dialogue scenes. Blindfolded speedrunning, did you mention that?
No, I think that was Charles.
That was Charles?
Yeah.
Symphony of the Night, do you want to talk about? Or any game, really?
Symphony of the Night is a game that it's kind of like a classic at GDQ. They make sure they do it every single time, sometimes blindfolded. That's a game where I feel like that's a game that, even if you've never heard of the game, it is so fun to watch speedrunning because it's just a giant mess what they could do with that game.
Yeah.
They've been speedrunning that game for 20 years, and every 6 months when there's a new GDQ, they always find a new skip.
That's incredible. The other thing that some other speedrunning tactics are death abuse, which you used in the upcoming segment where we speedran Sonic Adventure, where that means you die on purpose to get further ahead in the game. Frame perfect inputs means if a game runs at about 30 frames per second, you need to input one button press at a very specific 1/30th of a second, otherwise you miss it. And if you do it correctly,
the first Mario specifically is almost comprised entirely of frame perfect speedrunning, which is kind of insane actually.
Yeah. So I think it's about time to take a break, and we'll be back faster than you can make a Jill sandwich. I haven't played this game since 2001.
Hey, I haven't played this game since like 5 minutes ago. But then not 2001. This game wasn't out in 2001.
Alright, so let's battle.
Sonic.
I'll I'll be Sonic.
I'll be Shadow because I'm an edgy piece of garbage. Shadow's cooler. Talk about a low-budget flight. No movies or food or movies. Something
out of here.
Yeah, that's the line. Guadara, what did you do?
It was just like frozen. I'm like, what happened?
Oh, pressure is on. Come on, Guadara.
Like, really? Yeah, look at that. Look at that. Doing it.
Pro speedrun strats.
It's not bad, but it's just really, really...
Not good. Dated.
No, it's very, just like you have to be precise.
Yeah.
It's so quick, you change...
Not only that, you don't have the camera.
No.
movement,
Oh, no.
Like turn left or right.
I love how I just disregard the oats. My own
Where am I
speedrun.
supposed to go there?
Just
Could
the-
go up the ramp though if you're not you go that way.
It doesn't matter anymore.
I will give you a salty run back because of that beginning if you want.
What is the run back?
We do it again.
Play again?
Or
No,
read it.
it's fine, I don't care.
I put probably over 100 hours of this game into my life.
Great. A fair fight.
This game's story is like a solid 10.
There's a story to this
Correct.
game.
Out
Yeah!
of what?
Out of 100 you.
What?
I used Chaos Control.
So
Is there any way to block that?
No.
You just have to hit him back.
That's
No,
so
you just
lame.
gotta hit me back.
That's lame.
Come on, right now.
What level are you playing?
Rochambeau.
What level are you playing? Sounds great.
Let's do this.
Adam spam B.
So this is what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna die because the checkpoint is right there. So anything that boosts me ahead a little bit. No! No!
Oh, why did it go backwards?
Welcome to the Janko Sonic Adventure 2! No!
Oh, yes. They must have.
Adam just got the checkpoint.
Oh no.
Oh, you
So I'm skipping right ahead to where Adam is.
Oh,
Is
nice.
that a thing?
Yeah, look, I'm right where you are because the checkpoint
Rubber
counts for
banding.
both of us. Yeah.
No, I
yes.
missed it!
Sorry.
Oh,
I feel so cheated.
Oh, what?
That
it
was-
was right there too. Oh my god, you had it.
I'm salty. I'm salty, I would have won that.
That's life of Sonic Adventure.
So, we're playing Franklin, A Birthday Surprise, my favorite video game for the PlayStation 2.
This game is known in the speedrunning community as being the hardest video game ever made.
Was
Yeah.
that a load scene game?
Yes, it was.
Oh, someone called.
But how do we two-player this?
You're probably gonna have to beat the tutorial.
Oh, is this a side-scroller? I don't see a two-player
Okay,
option.
100%. You got a 100% stage one.
Oh, no, I can't do that. It's
No,
too late
you
for
have
that.
to
How do I
you have
jump?
to sequence break.
God, what is this?
You have to sequence break.
Yeah.
We're playing this on
Oh!
you died from.
Oh.
You just got beat.
I did just get beat.
normal any percent. There are no runs. Easy any percent. 1 hour 18 minutes. You think you could do
The
it?
whole game?
Whole game.
Oh, that's an extra life challenge.
If this was AGDQ, you'd be booed out already.
Oh, I would
Come on, Adam. You gotta train to be a speedrunner.
be.
Montage music would be good.
Black hole? No.
Yo, what was that? Image? You are.
No.
Not
No, I am not. I think you could get everything and still beat me.
yeah.
Really bad at this game, and I'm never playing video games ever again. Oh, and I ran out of water? Oh no!
Is he gonna go for the skip? Is he gonna go for the skip?
What? Franklin, come play a red
Can't
light,
read the
green
text.
light.
You
It's
got
easy.
button, man. This is why we told you to play in Japanese.
Yep.
Faster text.
Yeah.
Oh my
Less
gosh.
text.
Yeah.
Red
less
light,
text.
green light.
Did you do it?
No.
That sounded like a winning.
2, 3.
Uh-oh.
It's every
What?
3.
I wasn't even
Is
moving.
that a quick time event? I need to close my ears too. This is too
It's
cheap.
every 3. It's every 3 kicks. Stop now.
There we go. I think I have to do a specific thing. That was a friendly butt touch.
Franklin, a birthday surprise. You saw it here first, ladies and gentlemen. So, I don't know where to go from here except maybe to talk a little bit with Adam and co about the morals of speedrunning.
So, by morals, we mean specifically how each community views different subjects. So, a specific example I can point out is with Mario 64. I can't give exact names off the top of my head, but there was this whole dilemma based off using different controllers for different versions of the game.
Okay.
So there's one specific move, I think it's for Dire Dire Docks, that allows you to skip a whole section, but you have to be using, like, I think a GameCube controller in order to be able to pull it off, or other types of controllers.
So is this is a hardware limitation?
Yes.
That-
I think specifically analog controls.
Okay.
Or digital is what makes it possible.
Okay, so the input method, the hardware has changed throughout time, and some people say you're not really speedrunning Mario 64 unless you're doing it on a Nintendo 64 with the Nintendo 64 controller.
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay.
So, really though, whatever a community thinks should be allowed for that game is really what I think should be allowed for that game.
Mm-hmm.
So, in the case of Mario 64, I don't think it matters that much for it.
Okay.
Because there are a bunch of different versions of Mario 64, and depending on the platform you play it on, that can greatly change the actual speedrun.
Mm-hmm.
So, I think in a situation like that, since there's so many variations of the speedrun, then it shouldn't matter too much.
Sure.
So there are plenty of other examples out there. So yeah.
Yeah. Gavin, can you tell us about a game? Let's talk about some games we have speed run in the past. So, Gavin, can you tell us about a game you've tried to speed run?
When I was younger, I was super into Dark Souls, the first Dark Souls specifically, and I didn't really know about speedrunning at the time, but I was very into it. So eventually, when I beat it, I went to Twitch, and Twitch was like, it's pretty much the home of speedrunning. And I found out that people surprisingly speedrun Dark Souls. And it kind of just opened up an entire, like, new part of the game for me. Because, like, as an RPG, you want to take it slow. You want to incorporate certain character builds, like if you're going strength, dexterity, stuff like that. But for speedrunning, you kind of throw away all those RPG elements. And you just try to figure out what's the highest damage and how many times can I parry a boss to the point where I can kill it as fast as possible. So like with Dark Souls specifically, Dark Souls speedruns are pretty cool, but the thing is they're a little bit reliant at the beginning off of a specific weapon called the Dark Knight Halberd, which is pretty much the best weapon you can get for speedrunning Dark Souls. And if you can get that weapon at the beginning of the game, then you're pretty much set for the entire run, as long as you know the strategies and the tactics in terms of getting through the bosses. And early in the day, like when Dark Souls wasn't patched, they had certain skips. Nowadays, the skips are patched.
Ooh.
Yeah.
That's so you can patch out these glitches.
Yeah, exactly. Like in Dark Souls, you can get halfway through the game, and then there was this part where after you get all these boss souls, you go into the boss room. But if you did this specific jump, then you could just jump straight into the boss room and go right to the end. But then that was patched out later, and then you actually had to do most of the rest of the game.
So does that invalidate all of the former times in that game?
I wouldn't necessarily say so. I'd say like, for like at the time, that's what was being used. And
Context,
exactly. Those don't necessarily invalidate it, but now that it is patched out, you just have to approach it differently and speedrun it differently, pretty much.
Interesting. Yeah, that makes me think a lot about history and how we view different things at different eras.
Over time,
yeah. And but we do not want to get into history on Eric Games.
It's another episode,
because
maybe.
That's a subject that I'm vastly ignorant in. So let's go to Adam, and who will tell us about Resident Evil 2 speedrunning.
Yeah. So, specifically the remake. The game came out, and I absolutely adored it. But the thing where speedrunning Resident Evil 2 comes in is that at the end of each playthrough, you get a scorecard that's based off of your time and performance. I think in the remake it's just time. So if you beat the game in, I think it's under 2 hours or 2.5, or 2 hours and 30 minutes, then it's about, I think it's an S plus rank. And so for Resident Evil 2, I didn't do speedrunning like super competitively or anything, but it's really fun to go through and just path everything out and getting through in a time where you can get an S plus rank. And it's super beginner friendly for speedrunning too, because you don't need to use any glitches or anything to get through it at a good time. You just need to know how to path well and figure out where you need to go and when you need to be there. And the other hard thing, well, the only really hard thing is if you're like me and you pick up everything in games that isn't nailed down, trying not to pick everything up in this game is going to be a pain in the butt.
You mentioned something that made me think of perhaps the start of speedrunning. I don't know if this is historically accurate, but I'm pretty sure there were some early games that now are like mainstays in speedrunning, but they gave you different benefits for beating them quickly. And the one I'm thinking of is Super Metroid. Super Metroid is now played on every AGDQ. And back in the day, it was like a schoolyard trick. We didn't have the internet. So people would talk about, if you beat Super Metroid in under X minutes, what was the benefit? You get to see Samus in a bikini.
Oh, I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
Right? And that's like,
dance.
that's a bad look for games and representation of females in games. But that was a thing that was like, I'm used to playing this game, which is a long game, at a certain pace, but I get this, again, probably unsavory benefit from beating it faster. So how can I beat it faster? And that was a game that I think was a really big starting off point for speedrunning in general. So Charles, you want to tell us about Sonic Adventure?
Yeah, so Sonic Adventure right here. This is a game that I think I own it 5 times, 5 different copies.
You own it 5 times?
Different versions.
Okay.
It's I put many hours into it. You get ranked at the end of the level, E to A. While time does contribute to it, there's other stuff, but a big goal is to A rank every level, and something that you really have to be very specific with your speedrunning tactics. Like something I find very interesting. I don't know the term for this, but all the opposite ends of pretty much every single platform in the game is not. You could just jump through it. Like it's not a solid object.
It's not a collider. There's no collision box.
Yeah, no colliders on the opposite end of any platform in the entire game, and you could take advantage of that a lot and save lots of time, which is definitely something that's very interesting about the game. And yeah, it's Sonic games are just really fun to speedrun in general. It's very rewarding and has a lot of replayability.
Yeah. I mean, Sonic is a character and a brand that was built on speed, right? Got to go faster, and it was as much a Sega Genesis sales point as it was a good video game or fun video game. But that's for the Sonic episode. The game that I am the closest to have tried speedrunning was Super Ghouls and Ghosts. This is a notoriously difficult game for Super Nintendo, and I had a couple months period of time where I was just trying to beat it as many times as possible, and eventually I tried to beat it as quickly as possible, and I got down to around 40 minutes, one loop, and the world record is 15 minutes and 10 seconds.
For the first loop?
Yep, one loop, 15 minutes.
But is that considered the entire game?
No, there's a separate category for
The second loop?
Yeah, 100% of the game, and yeah, that's around 30 minutes, not surprisingly. But yeah, I think that's going to be a wrap for this episode. Today's real life advice is drink water.